right, so you guys wanted to really get into 13 Ghosts.
Yeah.
Not just the plot, but, like all the behind the scenes and the whole mythology and all that.
The whole shebang.
The whole shebang, yeah.
Absolutely.
And we did a deep dive. And I got to say, I was really fascinated with just how much there is to unpack with this film.
It's a fascinating one for sure. What struck me was that, there's so much more than meets the eye with this movie.
Yeah.
We're talking about a remake of a 1960s horror classic.
Right.
And there's this really unique system for creating the ghost, this Black Zodiac.
Yeah. So actually, before we even get into like the ghosts themselves and all that, I was really curious about the people behind the movie. And the director, Steve Beck, it seemed like he was the perfect guy for the job. For my research, he worked on visual effects for some pretty big films like The Abyss and Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade.
Yeah, those are some serious visual effects credentials, right?
Right.
And you can tell that experience was put to good use in 13 Ghosts. I mean, the ghosts themselves are so detailed and visually striking.
Yeah, and the production company, Dark Castle Entertainment, they've kind of got to think about remaking these classic horror films for a modern audience.
Exactly.
And it made me think, they kept the core concept of the original film, which was, the ghosts are only visible through these special glasses.
Right.
But they made it part of the story in this remake.
Yeah.
So they're called spectral glasses, and they actually end up playing a pretty significant role. What'd you think of that?
Well, it's interesting because it's not just a gimmick, right? It represents this idea of seeing beyond the surface and confronting the things that scare us.
Okay.
And for the characters in the film, that means literally coming face to face with their own past, their regrets, the darkness that they might be hiding from.
Whoa, I hadn't thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the actual story here. We've got our main character, Arthur Criticos, who's still grieving over the loss of his wife when he inherits this crazy mansion from his uncle, Cyrus.
Right. And this mansion is not your average fixer-upper. Cyrus was obsessed with the occult, and it turns out this house was designed to be some kind of machine powered by trapped ghosts. 12 of them, to be exact.
Wait, hold up. Before we go any further, we need to break down this whole Black Zodiac thing.
Okay.
What is it?
Right, so the Black Zodiac is like a dark mirror of the traditional zodiac.
Okay.
Each sign represents a negative aspect of human nature, and in this case, each sign is linked to a specific ghost.
Right.
Now, the movie never really goes into the full mythology of it, but it's clear that Cyrus was obsessed with the idea of using these ghosts and their power for his own purposes. His ultimate goal was to harness their energy to open something called the Ocularis Infernum, which basically translates to the Eye of Hell.
Okay, now that is seriously creepy. So we've got Arthur and his 2 kids inheriting this house that's basically a giant ghost-powered machine with a portal to hell waiting to be opened.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great weekend getaway, right?
Well, it certainly makes for a tense movie. And the real danger starts when the ghosts are unleashed.
Oh, yeah.
These are not your friendly neighborhood spirits. Each one has a tragic and often gruesome backstory.
Right.
And they are all pretty vengeful.
Okay, so let's meet these ghosts.
Right.
We know there are 12 of them, each representing a sign of the Black Zodiac.
Yes.
Where do we even begin with a lineup like that?
Well, we could start with the firstborn son, a young boy named Billy Michaels who was obsessed with cowboys.
Okay.
Tragically, he was killed during a mock duel with a real arrow.
Oh.
Now he wanders the mansion as a spectral cowboy with an arrow through his forehead.
Ouch, talk about a bad day of play.
All right.
And then there's the torso,
Right.
who was a gambler, Jimmy Gambino.
Yeah.
Apparently, he got on the wrong side of some dangerous people. And let's just say they didn't just take his money.
He's definitely a ghost you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. Or any alley, for that matter.
All right, so 2 down, 10 to go. Next up is the bound woman.
Right.
A prom queen named Susan LeGros.
Yes.
Her story is especially sad.
It is. She was strangled by her jealous ex on prom night, and now she roams the mansion forever bound by the ropes that ended her life.
Oh, that's absolutely chilling. But the 4th ghost, the withered lover, hits a little closer to home for Arthur.
Yeah.
Turns out to be.
Jean Critis, his deceased wife.
Right.
Her death in a house fire is what left Arthur so vulnerable and heartbroken, and that grief ends up playing a major role in the film's climax.
That's heavy stuff. So we've met 4 of the 12 ghosts so far, each one with a tragic backstory and a unique terrifying presence.
Right.
I'm almost afraid to ask, but who are the rest of these spectral housemates?
Oh, they're coming. Well, next we've got the Torn Prince. He was this high school baseball star who was a little too reckless for his own good. His need for speed led to a gruesome car accident,
Oh,
and now he's trapped in this spectral state, forever reliving that moment of his demise.
yeah. Talk of a cautionary tale.
Right.
It really makes you think about, those live fast, die young cliches.
Exactly.
What are some of the other personalities that we encounter in this house?
Well, then we have the Angry Princess. She was obsessed with beauty and driven to this tragic suicide when her looks began to fade.
Right.
Her story really makes you wonder about the pressures society puts on people, especially women,
Yeah.
to conform to these certain standards of beauty.
It's a good point. We see this theme of obsession and kind of like the dark side of beauty play out in a lot of horror film.
Yeah.
But I think 13 Ghosts does a really good job of making it feel real and relatable.
Absolutely. And then there's the Pilgrimess, who was accused of witchcraft and left to starve to death by her community.
Oh, wow.
Her story is a reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria and how easily fear can turn into violence.
It's like she represents the dark side of, puritanical society and the persecution of those who are different.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen similar themes explored in movies like The Witch.
Yeah.
And it always makes you think about how history can repeat itself if we're not careful.
For sure.
And speaking of history repeating itself, we have the Great Child and the Dire Mother, this horrifying duo from the circus world.
Oh, yeah.
The Great Child was born deformed,
Yes.
and his mother was fiercely protective of him, even resorting to violence to keep him safe.
Yeah.
Okay, that one is definitely nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
It's like a twisted take on the idea of, maternal love,
Mm-hmm.
where protection turns into something dark and possessive.
Right.
What about the last few ghosts?
Okay.
They sound just as intense.
Oh, they are. I've got the Hammer, a blacksmith who was wrongly accused of a crime and brutally murdered by a mob seeking revenge.
Oh, jeez.
His story is a powerful reminder of the importance of due process and how easily justice can be perverted by anger and fear.
It's like he represents that idea of an eye for an eye.
Yeah.
And how that kind of thinking can lead to this cycle of violence that's really hard to break.
Exactly. Then there's the Jackal, a man who was driven mad by his own inner demons and ultimately locked away in an asylum.
Okay.
He represents the dark side of the human psyche, the potential for madness and self-destruction that lurks within us all.
Right. It makes you wonder, what is it about the horror genre that allows us to explore these really dark parts of ourselves in a safe way? Maybe it's a way of confronting our fears and anxieties without actually having to experience them in real life.
That's a great point. And finally, we have the Juggernaut, this hulking serial killer who terrorized his victims with brute force.
Right.
He represents that raw, primal aggression that can sometimes take hold of humanity.
So we've got this whole spectrum of human flaws represented in these ghosts, from vanity and obsession to violence and madness.
Right.
But if each ghost is tied to some negative aspect of human nature,
Yeah.
what does that make Arthur the 13th ghost?
Right. He's not a villain.
Oh.
He's a grieving father trying to protect his children.
That's where things get really interesting. You see, Arthur isn't meant to represent a flaw in the same way as the other ghosts.
Okay.
He's destined to become the broken heart, the final piece needed to activate Cyrus's machine, but not because he's inherently bad or flawed.
So what makes him the key to this whole thing?
It's his love for his children, his willingness to sacrifice everything for them.
Right.
That intense, overwhelming love is what Cyrus needs to power the Ocularis Infernum.
Wow.
In a way, it's a twisted reflection of the dire mother and the great child.
That's such a clever twist on the typical horror movie formula.
Yeah.
We're so used to seeing villains driven by greed or power, but here the ultimate power source is love,
Right.
even if it's being manipulated for nefarious purposes.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if love and grief can be just as powerful, just as dangerous as hate or rage.
Absolutely. And it adds another layer to the film's exploration of family and sacrifice.
Right. Arthur's journey isn't just about fighting ghosts, it's about confronting his own grief and making impossible choices to protect the people he loves.
Yeah, it's like he's battling his own inner demons as much as he's fighting the literal goats in the house.
Exactly.
But let's talk a little bit more about Cyrus.
Right.
He's the one who set all of this in motion, and he's clearly driven by something pretty dark.
Yeah, Cyrus embodies this idea of unchecked ambition
Yeah.
and the pursuit of power at any cost.
Yeah.
He doesn't just want to control the physical world, he wants to tap into something beyond, something he believes will give him ultimate power.
Right. And he's willing to use and exploit anyone to get it, even his own family.
Mm.
It's like he's lost all sense of humanity in his quest for power.
That's a great observation. And it's interesting to think about how the ghosts themselves are also a reflection of that exploitation.
Yeah.
They were all victims in their own right, trapped and manipulated by Cyrus for his own gain.
It adds this whole other layer of tragedy to this story. Not only were they victims in life,
Yeah.
now they're being used in death as well.
Yeah.
They're stuck in this cycle of suffering, unable to find peace.
That's where this concept of spectral justice comes in.
Right.
Each ghost is trapped in a state that reflects the nature of their death or the flaws that led to their demise.
Okay.
It's like they're being punished for eternity for their sins or for the circumstances that led to their untimely ends.
That's a pretty heavy concept.
It is.
It makes you wonder if there's any way for them to break free from that cycle to find some kind of redemption.
It's a question the film leaves open to interpretation.
Right.
Some might see it as a bleak commentary on the enduring consequences of our actions, while others might find a glimmer of hope in the idea that even in death, there's a chance for growth or change.
And speaking of interpretations, I'm curious about how people reacted to the movie when it came out.
Yeah.
It's definitely a unique blend of horror, mythology, and family drama.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a hit with critics and audiences? It seems like it got kind of mixed reviews. When it first came out, some critics liked the visual effects
Right.
and the whole creepy ghost design,
Yeah.
but others felt like the script could have used a little more
Right.
depth.
Yeah, there were definitely some reviewers who felt that the characters could have been fleshed out a bit more and that the focus on the visual spectacle maybe overshadowed the emotional core of the story.
I can see that. But, even with those criticisms, 13 Ghosts seems to have found a real following over the years.
Oh, for sure.
What do you think it is about this movie that keeps people coming back for more?
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, the premise itself is so unique and intriguing, right? This idea of a house that's actually a machine powered by trapped ghosts.
Yeah.
And then you have these striking visuals, those incredibly detailed and disturbing ghost designs that really stick with you.
Yeah, those ghost designs are definitely iconic.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen so much fan art and even cosplay inspired by those characters.
Yeah.
So, they've taken on a life of their own beyond the movie.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's the power of good visual storytelling.
Right.
And I think beyond the visuals, people are drawn to the film's mythology.
Right.
The whole Black Zodiac concept. It's something that's only hinted at in the film, but it leaves so much room for speculation and fan theories.
Yeah, there's definitely this sense of mystery surrounding the Black Zodiac that makes you want to learn more.
Right.
It's like the movie just scratches the surface of this whole other world.
Yeah.
This dark mirror of astrology and the occult.
And that sense of mystery extends to the house itself, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a backdrop for the action. It's
Right.
practically a character in its own right.
Yeah.
This massive, shifting glass structure inscribed with Latin spells, both beautiful and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, I think the house is like this brilliant visual representation of the film's themes. It's all about transparency, vulnerability, the inability to hide from your past.
Yeah, and those moving walls,
Right.
the way they shift and rearrange.
Right.
It's like the house itself is alive. Yeah.
Trapping the characters with their own demons.
Right. It's like you're never quite sure what's lurking around the next corner or
Yeah.
who might be watching you through those glass walls.
Exactly.
It definitely adds to the suspense and the overall creepiness of the film.
And speaking of creepy, we can't forget about those spectral glasses. They allow the characters, and by extension, the audience, to see into the hidden world of the ghosts, right?
Right.
It's like the house itself is a giant set of spectral glasses, revealing the darkness that lurks beneath the surface.
That's a really cool way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
And the way they use those glasses in the film, sometimes to reveal the ghosts, sometimes to hide them,
Right.
it adds another layer of tension and uncertainty.
Yeah, you're never quite sure what you're going to see next.
Yeah.
And I think that uncertainty is part of what makes the film so effective.
Right.
It plays on our own fears of the unknown, of what might be lurking just beyond our perception.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We had a deep dive on 13 Ghosts.
We have.
From the director's background and this unique concept of the Black Zodiac to those really amazing ghost designs and the iconic glass house.
Hmm.
It's clear this film has a lot to offer.
It does.
But for you, what would you say is the most important takeaway?
For me, it's the film's exploration of human nature, you know? Beneath all the scares and special effects, there's a deeper message about the choices we make and the consequences that follow.
Right.
Each ghost represents a dark aspect of ourselves, a reminder that we all have the potential to make mistakes, to hurt others, to succumb to our flaws.
That's a really insightful way of looking at it.
Yeah,
It's not just about ghosts and jump scares. It's about facing our own inner demons and understanding the power of our choices.
exactly. And ultimately, I think 13 Ghost challenges us to consider the idea of spectral justice.
Right.
Are these ghosts truly being punished for their sins, or are they trapped by the circumstances of their deaths, by the choices they made or the choices that were made for them?
That's a heavy question to leave our listeners with.
It is.
But it's a good one.
It is.
It makes you think about the nature of good and evil, the idea of free will,
Mhm.
and whether we're truly in control of our own destinies.
Yeah, those are great points.
Well, on that note, thanks for joining us
Thank you for having me.
for this deep dive into 13 ghosts.
It's my pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring,
Yeah,
keep questioning,
absolutely.
and keep diving deep into those fascinating and sometimes spooky mysteries
Yes.
that await you.